Welcome, everybody. Today, we are here to talk about the importance of leadership when times are tough. And with me for this conversation today is Judy Shen Filerman. Judy and I met, I want to say it was 2021, most likely, when I was running the sponsorship program at Cargill, when I was working on the DEI team there. And we brought you in to talk about owning your own career when you're not a part of the sort of dominant corporate demographic, right? Let's just call it what it is. How do you own your own career when you're not a white male in, corporate environment? And, as well as, what can leaders do to support people too? So loved what you brought to the table then, wanted to have you on the podcast here today for this conversation. So thank you for being here. I'd love for you to introduce yourself more and want to just hear a little bit about your own career journey too before we really kick off.
Okay. Ken, thank you so much for having me here. I am so thrilled to be here and to really have this opportunity to talk about leadership when I think right now it matters most. And one of the, when we look at the background that I have had is the American dream, right? Coming here as an immigrant kid at the age of 6, grew up in New York City with no English and a culture I had no idea about, and then being able to kind of loving to be with people and ideas and loving to make things happen. Got into Harvard undergrad, and eventually Harvard Business School, and then into the corporate world and consumer packaged goods. I became the youngest executive at Polaroid, and then eventually coming into my own entrepreneurship and my own firm in the last 20 years. I talk about that not because of me. I talk about that in terms of what I love about this country and what I love about the potentiality all humans have that get expressed in the U.S. in a way that we don't necessarily get in other countries, right? I do think that there is some things that are being challenged right now in that particular area. But in that journey, what I have seen for sure are two things. One that you just said is we make our future. We need to own what we want in our future, especially when we're not the power dominant people. That's true in any, culture, by the way. People worry about are we saying power dominant white men? Oh my gosh, is that every culture has a power dominant. The question is, if you're not the power dominant group, how do you still go live your dream and make it happen, right? And so I was lucky enough and worked my butt off to get to those positions. And so I've really dedicated the last 20 years focusing on two things: best self and belonging. How do all people have the opportunity to live their best selves, especially if you know that over the history, these are marginalized individuals that didn't get support, think Redline and Access and those kind of things. And then having worked with amazing white men who have been my mentors and my sponsors, knowing that they're out there to support people through their journeys as great leaders. And they're always great people who look to develop people. And so I want to be out there and inspiring the ecosystem of leaders to do that very thing. Because at the end of the day, I'm a mathematical bottoms line kind of person, which is when you do right by people, you always do right by your business.
Yeah. So I forgot until we were in our pre-recording today that you had a CPG background, which I think I didn't necessarily have when we first met, do now. So I love that we have that in common. But I think if I remember correctly, unlike other weirdos like me, you don't come from the HR background, if I remember too, right? You came into the kind of consulting you're doing more or less from the business side. I'd love to just hear a little bit about what were those beginnings and how did that lead you into the kind of consulting you're doing now?
Yeah, right. So, right. I mean, I am the odd duck because my background actually is on front lines, P&L, management. And so in this kind of work, it's also where I think executives find comfort with me because I talk their language, I've lived their lives, which is kind of a fun thing, frankly, for me, because I use a lot of people analogies with business analogies, right? And so, but when I left B school, when I was in corporate America, had no idea about executive development or even coaching, and really was just learning about HR, right? So I got into this completely by happenstance. It really was because I left corporate really kind of very openly because I had major infertility issues, and I decided to focus on being a mother, which I never thought about was that important to me until you can't be a mother. And also you're like, wow, do I really want to be a mom? It's like, oh my gosh, yes. And so when I had a potential of never becoming a mom, I made the really hard choice to leave corporate America at the very, very height. I was the youngest executive at Polaroid at that point. Decided to leave to pursue motherhood. I have a 20 and 24-year-old, so yay. And I think it was really out of that moment when I had a colleague that said, you know what, you've always been a great coach to your people. Want to come over to my firm and do some strategy development? And then eventually I was like, what's this coaching thing? And then just kind of fell in love with the whole concept of helping people develop. And I think for someone like you that knows consumer packaged goods, I love developing brands, right? Because brands make people happy. Right? Really good products make people happy. You figure out what they cared about and you really make sure you focus on the consumer voice. You take some of those really same fundamental caring moments, you move it to human beings, and it goes into coaching. Who are the people? What do they care about? How do you make them the best they can be? How do you make them and the organization happy and meet their goals? So it's been less of a kind of record scratching thing than people think. It's actually a really natural shift over. And I love people and I love developing people.
Interesting. Yeah. What popped in my head was there's some basics to consulting that are really just problem solving that are sort of you're doing in any position, whether or not the title consultant is there, which is, it's like the number one question that sometimes people forget to stop and ask is wait, what are we really trying to solve here? Which is, you would be doing that in a line of business or in an analyst role or as a consultant anyway, right? So there's some of these just fundamental how you look at and solve problems that are sort of title agnostic, right? You can bring those skills like you've done, bring those skills into consulting from the business side, for example. I love that.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I didn't realize was considered quote unquote unique was the fact that, everything I did had to have an outcome that was metrics oriented. That's how you run all businesses. And so as I was doing all this development stuff, I had surveys at outcomes and people were like, oh, look at all this. All this was like, of course you have to survey. Of course you have to have an outcome. So I'm really, really, really focused on, being clear about objectives to your point, having a journey and then making sure the outcome then meets the objectives, right? In a metrics oriented way. So I love the fact that you talk about how we really can bring in so many transferable skills or experiences into anything that we do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody can run an event. It's a question of, what are we actually hoping comes out of it, right? And having that conversation. Yeah.
Bravo. Same thing about leadership. Why are we all here, really?
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about that, right? So I think, we had a very short conversation, saved all the good stuff for the podcast, I promised to our listeners here, which is, we're in a moment that I think, and I think you were saying, right, is really a call for good leadership. The need for good leadership has never been higher, perhaps, than when times are tough, right? And we're certainly in tough times from many angles.
Right. I mean, I think we have we need a word that is a differentiator because we keep on hearing the word unprecedented. The unprecedented has become normal.
Yeah.
And so if the unprecedented has become normal, we are in surely uncharted territory. Let's just call it for what it is. Yeah. And so whether you're talking about a leader in nonprofit, in education, in corporate, in government, more important than ever, why the heck are you there? Like, why are you there, leaders? Are you there because you just want a power? Are you there because you want to just maximize the share price so you can pocket all of that and so you can have a really comfortable life? Or are you here actually to lead? I mean, as an executive development coach, my point is why are you here as a leader? It's okay. Just be aware of why you actually chose to have this job. Because the people see it anyway. I mean, this is what's always so amazing for me is leaders think somehow their true intent is hidden from their people. Your people always know. So if you're transparent anyway, just speak it to yourself. And so, and the reason I say that is more than ever, your people are watching. Who are you really for? And if it's about you, I'm okay. I'll take care of me too. And you know what's going to happen? In all this uncertainty, all this unpredictability, it's the unraveling of the organization and the engagement of people. And we all talk about wanting productivity, innovation. Kiss that one goodbye. I mean, sincerely.
Yeah.
Unless you're a leader that is sticking your neck out to take care of your people today, you're kind of done on your outcomes basis. You can, speak all you want, but for someone who is very, very bottom line oriented, and I know that people's engagement, sense of safety, sense of being seen, ties to productivity and sales and turnover and retention, all of that other stuff, it's just math. The math to me is pretty clear that we're in dire straits. And so, but the great leaders are out there. Use this time to maximize how you lead, because you will come out of all of this X times better outcomes and people engaged and loyalty and retention than the leaders that really were there just to survive. So I'm always about go thrive, but thriving in this moment takes so much courage because our systems are actually unraveling.
Yeah, it's so many little thoughts bubbled up for me here. So, right, I think to your point, and I was in some conversations over this summer where some thought leaders where I think were really leaning in on, hey, if you're in this to make gobs of money, great, just own that, right? And that's certainly a part of it, right? I mean, I think, current state of society is money is needed, right? To feed your family, house your family, all that.
And money's not bad.
That's okay.
I love money too.
But perhaps you need to follow the bouncing ball a little bit more too, especially if you're a leader or a business owner who has team members around. Well, if it's not just you, then you need all these other people to hit that goal. And how are you going to do that in a way that has that multiplier effect, so to speak, right? And it makes me think of my time working in the restaurant industry, where there were some really clear differences even between sort of corporately run stores versus franchise stores, right? So corporately run stores where, a company might own hundreds, and the general manager of that restaurant, is technically a corporate employee, may or may not be incented at all on the performance of that store specifically, versus Bob, who has let's just make something up here. Bob, who has a franchise to Subway down the block, right? And that's Bob's business. And he's much more incentivized to have a highly engaged staff, right? To know that, hey, the more engaged my staff is, the better experience they give guests, the more money guests spend, right? That there's this sort of level of ownership that you need to take for your business, and thinking about then how are you leading your people in a way to obtain those objectives that help you obtain your goals. I just took us, I think, maybe 3 times around the cul-de-sac on that one. Did any of that land?
Well, I mean, totally right. I mean, I think there is something about ownership, like of any person, whether it's the ownership of the leader, it's the ownership, I've taught, business school graduates and so on and so forth. And so at the end of the day is, again, why are you here and what outcomes are you seeking? Right. And so, and I think one of the elements that when I work with managers and leaders, and I said, and my point here is, are you a leader of people or are you a manager of tasks? You can have people that are amazing manager of tasks that get things done, but they will never inspire the people who are working for them to reach farther than what they're told to do in a very literal way. And that's the beauty of leaders, differential from managers. I don't mean like managers, like manager levels, but manager of things, right? And the great leaders can do management of tasks, but then somehow get into the heart of the people, the minds of the people, and get them to do the things that they themselves knew they could, but maybe their team didn't. And the whole thing about the esprit de corps, what happens in, groups that just somehow galvanize. And you have so much of now research in org behaviors talking about it's because people are listened to. People feel safe. Again, this notion of, my work before my title, and leaders that really are affiliative, that are democratic, that are also visionary, that when I can bring the people in and take them somewhere that they can imagine, where people can go is just beyond what we can imagine. What's really fascinating is, fear also works. Like fear actually works, right? I mean, contract people, make them do things, make them scared. They'll be productive as long as you keep that pressure on them, and they'll go as far as you're going to push them. But after that, they're burnout tired, they're not as engaged, so on and so forth. So I'm not saying that fear doesn't work, but I'm like, if you can bring more joy and dignity to the world, why don't you just choose that one? Like, why don't you choose that path as opposed to the path of fear, which is like everybody's upset, getting sick, everyone goes home a little more contracted. And like, come on, let's just choose a better path, right? The happier path. And happiness does not mean the fact that people are not going to be engaged. I think that's a misunderstanding sometimes. But as you were just saying, is what is the motivation? Why am I here? And seeing the people not just as the means, but also the end. And I think when you really treat the people that are in your team as the end, and be gracious and grateful that they're the ones that allow you to achieve your actual larger objective, that should be a moment of humility, right? To kind of see what you together created that you as a leader without them could never create. So I think the leaders that believe that they should get, at this point, was it 600x versus the lowest level person, and really believe that they themselves are the reason why the company is where it is, I think they actually haven't really understood kind of operational analysis. Because if you look at just fundamental, like operation analysis, take all those hundreds of people out, the junior level people, the shoes can't make it run. So I think, again, the great leaders understand that every level person at every part is what actually allows the greater good and the greater outcomes to happen. And that's what I love doing is helping them thrive.
So I'm just thinking back to a podcast guest I had on who I think very openly said, I'm going to butcher it, and it's so funny because the day we're recording is the day that the podcast dropped. In fact, I just listened to it this morning. But it was something like, we think about, who's the most important person, right, in the company, and leaders. It's easy for them to think that it's them, right, that it's the leaders. But at the end of the day, depending on your business, it's the people who are selling, or, I'll go back to the restaurant industry. It's the people who are making the food and delivering it to your table, right? Like they're who are actually servicing, your customer base, so to speak. So I think it's interesting to go back to like what really matters here. And I was just thinking about, so I was coaching a gentleman this spring/summer, and I think it's spring. And I would say, like, it seemed like every week that I talked to this person, his hair was on fire, and it was on fire because they were in a business sector where I think we were in a particular space of what I was calling tariff roulette, in the spring. And so it was just chaos for this guy. It was just chaos. Every week it was a sprint of math exercises to like figure out how to balance the scales in some way of what the projected cost of, goods coming in were going to be, and how they needed to either go back and negotiate, or how that needed to flow, to customers and pricing. And so what you were saying, it just had me thinking about like that chaos moment. And I think there's been a lot of moments of chaos for leaders like that this year. So what are some of the conversations you're having with leaders around, like, again, I think there's many angles with which how 2025 has been an interesting and challenging and maybe chaotic year. What are some of the conversations you're having with people around how this has been sort of that call for leadership, so to speak?
Yeah. So, I really have the opportunity to really speak with different constituencies, if you will, within organizations. I work with C-level leaders. I work with senior, mid-senior leaders. I work with junior people, and so I work with at the C-level largely, white men, and then other positions, women, people of color, LGBTQ plus, because that's also a core part of the focus of the firm and my passion as an immigrant Chinese American woman. Um, and what I know for sure is happening across is a degree of anxiety and fear about the self, about the larger organization, and just constantly, just nonstop shifting. This is the whole thing about the uncertainty, unpredictability, right? That people like, so the what happens when we are in these moments of uncertainty and unpredictability is we tend to really start to have this narrow focus on things that we think are controlling. So it tends to be the left brain, the numbers, the production, the volume, the task list. All those things are what we actually focus on, when in fact, rather than getting really, really micro focused and myopic, we need to really pull back and get to the big picture here. And so, what I've been working with executive senior leaders who are running is I actually give them like breathing space.
Mm-hmm.
When are you actually having some quiet time? Because your job is not to run. Your job is to actually vision and be strategic. Where's your
Mm-hmm.
space? And so many leaders are doing. They're taking away from the work that they're meant to do, which is to step back and watch it all and then figure out strategically, where am I going to move? So I think for a lot of the senior leaders, it's taking a breath, really getting back to purpose. Why are you in this business? Why are you leading? What is it that you see about this organization that has major opportunities? Yes, this is just yet another obstacle, challenge, whether it's a tariffs, whether it's about production costs, all these different things, cost management. Been here before, got it. But then you got to look around and say, wait a minute. So the thing that makes this place actually work are all the people here. How are my people doing?
Mm-hmm.
Am I checking in with them? Are my meetings more than just about what did you do, but also really include, so how are you doing? Like, how are you doing? How can I help you be better at what you do? When people are scared, they don't need you to make them more scared. They need you to, as a leader, to say, you know what? Let's control what we can control. Right now, what we can control is what we're doing here as a team. We're creating, we're doing great things. Even here, the cost management side, let's get creative about that. What can we do? Bring out the best in people. But the only way you get there is by actually seeing them in their wholeness, seeing them in their dignity, and saying, I don't see you as a cog, I see you as a person. Let's find some time actually carved out to be human, to be empathetic, to be caring. And those same people will work double X on your behalf. And I think that's where I think the missing piece gets to, is that when we get so focused and with the uncertainty, fear, the unraveling of things, we go to the amygdala of the brain and we're just focused on fear. You got to
Mm-hmm.
step back and focus on light and joy and really about thriving. I'm not being Pollyanna, because how we think about things is how we create our world. And so I say to leaders, think about the opportunities, but most importantly, realize that you're under the responsibility of the caring for people, whether that's 3, 5, 50, 500, 5,000, 50,000. There's a call to action in that kind of leadership in this moment of time, and call it three U's: uncertainty, unpredictability, and then also the unraveling. All three of them are happening at the same time.
It's it's interesting because it's counter, and I'm going to maybe put it in my words a little bit. It's a little counterintuitive because it seems like the harder things get, the natural inclination is to hold tighter, right? To white knuckle it through, not to take a step back and bring more vision, strategy, breathe, you know. Um,
Yeah.
into the picture. And what you were saying, kind of oddly, it reminds me a ton of where we were in the middle of the pandemic. And I know Cargill was doing this, and I can't remember if other organizations were doing this, but we had this whole like in the zeitgeist, so to speak, was this whole like, how are you doing really? Right. Kind of moment. And I feel like a lot of companies were kind of having the same question was kind of permeating. And it's just interesting for me to hear that in because it resonates with what I'm hearing and seeing in organizations too. How the moment we're in, while we're not all necessarily shut into our homes or trying to social distance while working the shop floor, so to speak, like those were really hard, odd times, but it's also a hard time now. And so it's like, how do we remember to kind of go back to some of those things that, and I don't know, maybe I'm being overly generous, but like these things that we ended up leaning into at that time, it's like, maybe we never should have. I don't know if that we did, but maybe not everybody did, but maybe we never should have stopped leaning into those things.
It's just so interesting. Well, I mean, as you're speaking to the pandemic, the very, very real kind of similarity here is the fact that we really felt like when we were outside, we would be in danger. Mm-hmm. We could actually die. And I think what's also really important for us to address here is the fact that the degree of the danger is not equally applied in the United States right now. Mm. If you're a Latinx, just looking Hispanic should put you in deep fear. Right. Not because it's theory, but because of the thousands and thousands of people that have been detained who are of Latinx background, right? So they're living in that fear every day. And I know people that are living that fear. It doesn't matter if they're professionals. Because when they're outside, someone who's a very senior person said, I have my daughter carrying her U.S. passport just in case she gets stopped. This is an American Latina who's saying this about her daughter. Okay? We have Black individuals that understand right now with what has happened in the workforce layoff in the government, what has happened in these cities. Again, I am in these places speaking to people of those backgrounds that understand that they are actually getting targeted for either layoffs or potentially as dangerous people. So let's call it for what it is, which is that, the pandemic was a virus that was going out there. Mm-hmm. Right now, there really are people feeling disproportionate fear. Immigrants, right? I'm a naturalized citizen. I've been here since I was 6. I've been here for 53 years. But did I go make sure I got my citizenship papers recently? Found them where they were in the file folder that I haven't looked at for 20 years, just in case someone needs to prove the fact that I'm actually an American because I'm Asian. I mean, it sounds crazy. I've never done that before, but I did. So I'm just saying here, as much as there for some, life feels kind of like similar, there are a lot of marginalized folks, LGBTQ plus, that know that if you're out there and people can tell that you may very well be under attack. And so now, why does this affect leaders? If people saying, well, that's just their personal lives. Do we really think there's like a wall between what happens in our personal lives and what's happening in the world? And then when we come to the office, like we don't just go, like just turn this off and turn it back on and we'll just be like a robot here. We have to understand that life is porous. The world is porous. So whatever's happening outside in the world is what people are bringing in. If we are seeing this degree of focus and target, I guarantee you, leaders, that you have people who are women, who are LGBTQ plus, who are Latinx, Black, Asian, Muslim, others that are wondering, do you have my back? Do you really have my back? And especially if DEI is rolled back. So you're telling me since 2020, this has been all kind of a performative sham? So now I'm going to really double click and look at you and wonder, so are you really for me? or are you really not? And so a couple things happen there. Either you can decide to lean in and help your people understand that you want them to thrive and you understand that the challenges are out there and you're here to create psychological safety and a safe space for them. And whatever people talk about wokeism happened because there was so much uh, inequity out there. So I won't go into that whole thing, but the reality here, right, is people have been suffering and the
Yeah.
great leaders take care of their people and understand what that is. So I say to people, don't run away from it, lean into it. Like ask people, as you were just saying during the pandemic, how are you, comma, really? And just stop and actually listen. And then if that gets you too scared, focus on talking about their careers, talking about how are you doing at work? What are you enjoying about it? How can I help you grow more? Because you have what we have seen in all of our programs with professionals, with women, professional of color, when they're in where the programs where the managers are involved, we have seen the biggest uplift in opportunities and growth when the manager has spent quality time on a regular basis sitting down with their direct report, actually simply listening to what makes you motivated. What are you really interested in doing right now? Given the work that you have, how can I be helpful? Because those three simple questions shows people, your direct reports, that you care about them as people. And as human beings, right, that dignity, that sense of being seen is what helps all of us thrive. And so, in a time when you know that certain particular people are actually feeling heightened degree of fear, wow, a great leader at this point does, move to them, look at them and say, how can I really take care of you in this moment? That's the opportunity for leaders today. Lean in.
So I feel like, at least when I first entered the workforce, there was still this like hanging on of like leave your personal life at the door. Right. And then as I kind of got into leadership development, which is maybe because of the hippies that started, some of the work that in the organizations that I joined were very much calling for, no, like you need to get to know your people. Right. And so I feel like my career has sort of come full circle to, gosh, people are really recognizing that now, right? That we need to get to know each other on a personal basis. So I love where you were leaning there, which is, I think if people go out and like Google stay interviews or Google, how to have a career conversation, and you'll find 5, 6, 7, 8 questions that if you just, and you name some of them already, just have ask these questions and listen openly, right? And I think where people get stuck to the first question we were kind of both talking about, which is like, how are you doing really, is I feel like leaders get a little hesitant because they're like, well, I don't know what to say in return, right? When someone's sharing something challenging or difficult or that I don't have any access to understanding. And it's like, I would just encourage leaders to well, be in the moment and don't worry about that part, right? Because probably if you just said, wow, I didn't know that, or I would not have known that had you not shared that. Thank you for sharing. That must be hard. That's all you really need to say, right? That gives me a lot to think about.
I love what you're saying because the actually part of our program, because we do really work with leaders in direct reports or even across, where there are differences. And understandably, when there's difference, people get nervous. Like, if we can just say that's okay to be nervous, it's okay. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with us, right? And then my point is relax into the nervousness and look into the other person, because we're all the same in our love for our family members, or looking for places of joy and having places that we love going or things that we love doing. That's kind of a human thing. And so when I've actually encouraged managers and leaders to do that, and simply listen and say, so tell me what you really enjoy doing the weekend. And if you can start first, it makes it a lot easier for direct report, by the way. And then if they're saying something that you don't really understand, to your point, our holistic listening model talks about, so tell me more about that. I'm not aware of that. Can you just tell me more about that? We all love telling people about who we are, right? Most of the time. And so if you can just ask those, to your point, those prompting questions, people tend to really focus on those very positive things that actually can connect, because we naturally seek to connect.
Mm-hmm.
We actually had an example of a manager and direct report, completely different ethnicity, race, backgrounds, socioeconomic, so on and so forth. And there really was kind of nervousness among the manager, like, what do I talk about? Now, first of all, to your point, whether you look at for conversation starters, as we call them, is there some basic things put in front of you and just ask those questions? It's amazing how easy actually it is. You don't have to go make it up on your own. And what was fascinating, as what the manager was saying, was when I just started asking these questions, my direct report just started answering them. And I just didn't realize how easy it actually was. So we give them a guide. Right. But once they start conversing and having a little bit of prep, it actually goes so easily. But you know what the key thing here we found is not just doing it once, doing it consistently every single month so that it becomes a habit. And it's taken about 3 to 4 conversations before that flow, that trust, that je ne sais quoi thing about human beings being connected tends to click. And we've just seen it time and again. And so it's really, really doable. And it's a lot easier than what we think. But leaders need to take, and managers do need to take the lead here.
Yeah. I would add to that, preferences change too, right? And so you can't just have a career conversation every other year. You know, I always say you should be having a career conversation every 6 months or so. You never know what a life circumstance might change that completely changes someone's plan, so to speak, of what they wanted to do, or they just moved into a role that they thought was on the plan that they wanted to be on, and now 6 months and they're like, this has nothing, this is not what I want to be doing, right? So I think I like your point of, how do you keep this conversation regular? Well, I'm looking at the time, so I want to be respectful of the time here, and I'm gonna give us a violent shove into the advice column. We could keep talking, but so I think I ask everybody to bring a few pieces of advice. So we'll go to the first one, which is, what's one piece of advice you have directly for leaders out there?
My strong belief that's also backed by data is the fact that when leaders step back and then deepen into their own humanity, they do crazy, great, wild things. So when you go into the office, rather than saying, here's my list and let me go make sure to start having meetings at 8 a.m. that go all the way to 5 p.m., I'd say actually purposely don't have a meeting until 8:30. Spend a half hour on 2 things. Why am I here really? And who are the people in my team that I need to connect with? Just start with those 2 very simple questions. And because that'll unfold into you actually connecting with your people at this very time where there is uncertainty, unpredictability, the unraveling, right? Mm-hmm. And so to actually carve out time to get back to basics of why you're here as a leader. And then 2 is to really recognize as a leader, my job in order to reach my outcomes is to help my people thrive. 2 things. I'm here to make them be their best selves, help them get there, and to create a real sense of belonging for everyone, right? Because when we do that, we can actually really, really, really build out the business outcomes that we already talked about kind of earlier. So I think about this notion of conversations that connect, right? And so think about conversations that connect. What can you do in this moment? And I have 5 really simple questions, some of which we already talked about. One is, how are you? And I'm going to take Ken's comment, really, right? And importantly, listen. Stay there for those 15 seconds where you think you're going to just implode, because I can't not sit in the silence, because people need to have time to figure out, like, what did you really mean by that, right? Mm-hmm. So ask a question and just stay silent and be calm, right? 1. 2 is, what are you working on right now that you're really excited about, right? Let your direct report lead you to where's that they want to go. And again, you showing your sense of care. 3 is, how can I enable you more meaning, satisfaction, joy at work. What can I do? Right? Again, that's saying you're in control, they're in control, you can make something happen for them, regardless of what's happening out in the larger realm. And then again, here this thing about the career and caring for them is when you think about being your best self at work, when you think about doing work that would just keep you going, even if you weren't paid, what would that be? Right? You can find some version of what that best self actually means. And then finally is this is really, really what our participants have really valued. When the manager says, what's one thing I can do right now to help you be better at what you do, to be happier at what you do, to be more productive, to learn, whatever that means. What's one thing that I can do? And really, really listen, take notes, go back. And where the payoff happens is that when you follow up and say, so Jill, Juanita, whomever, when we were talking, you were talking about these three things. I've thought about that. And here's some thoughts that I have about what we can do to move forward as next steps.
Yeah.
Wow. Powerful.
Nice.
Conversations that connect.
Conversations that connect. Love it. So as we think about senior leaders out there who are supporting leaders, HR who's supporting leaders, what's your advice for them on how to best support leaders?
So when I was doing a cascade of people-focused, diversity-focused leadership, where there was new ways of connecting that many leaders were not used to doing, kind of leaning into that personal part, what I said to the most senior leaders, C-suite, and the level right below that is what you measure is what your people will do. What you measure is what your people will do. And so measure is also qualitative. So I had them every time they had the direct team meeting was to ask the question having to do with people. Mm-hmm. Tell me about how you're doing with the people connect. What are you doing right now that you're seeing successful in terms of making sure that people are being seen, the fact that you're connecting with them? And my point to them was if you ask that at every single meeting, guess what? They're going to need to know that when they get in there, they're going to have to answer for you. You don't have to even tell them what to do. You just have to ask the questions. That's what executive leaders are supposed to do. Ask the questions that drive the behaviors and outcomes that you seek to achieve.
I love it. That makes me think about, I always encourage people who I'm working with coaching or leadership development programming. I always say, find that person that you can share what your goal is. Maybe that's somebody who can give you some feedback. But once you've shared that goal, now you have to look at this person, in the eye on a regular basis, and in turn, empowering them to ask you, have you done X, Y, or Z, right? So it just made me think about that.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's why I love that, right? It doesn't have to be, we don't have to create a scorecard for it. We don't have to say, hey, you need to do X number. Simply a senior leader around the table saying, who here had a connect over the last week? How'd that
Absolutely.
go?
Absolutely.
Right. Everybody should have one. Cool. Do better next week. And I'm going to ask the same question, right? I like that. So as we're kind of winding down here, the very last piece is for those who want more DreamBridge partners or Judy Shen Filerman in their lives, how do people get a hold of you? What do you want people reaching out to you for?
So feel free to email me. It's Judy, Judy, at dreambridgepartners.com altogether. So having a dream, right? Having a bridge, and then having partners doing it. Just think about dreambridgepartners.com. Feel free to email us or just look on the website. There's also a contact area there. Reason why I'm saying this is we know that as the economy is likely to turn, that more and more with the unpredictability, the uncertainty, and the unraveling that's happening, people are looking for three things that we're focusing on. One is what we call 3 pathways. One is B. How can we find center and calm? So we're doing meditation practices for only half an hour. We're starting all this in October. The second is to connect. again, conversations about how we can be our best and addressing some of the challenges that we're all facing. And then our third one is create, is we're actually really, really focusing on how to build your brand, how to really focus on what matters as you get to the year end. And we're going to be doing more like career transitioning, as we know their layoffs are coming in, but a lot of really programs targeted to individuals to help them really be their best selves. And then the other, on the more organizational side and leadership side, we continue to do our work on what we call interconnected leadership and interconnected teaming. And one that's really focused about is when we really are connected and when we really, really care and see each other, we together can do more than we ever could on our own. And we, seen that time again with our clients. So we do a lot of that teaming leadership development work as well. So,
Nice.
So the individual, the whole, and the of the teams, and then at the systems level too. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited. Just to give that a second plug back to some of the work that you're going to be rolling out in October. That's sort of direct to the people, right? Which I love and can't wait to see that take off. So, Judy, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure.
Kent, I have so enjoyed it. I hope that you'll ask me back again at some point. So thank you.
I certainly will. Thank you.